Hello and welcome to The Last Mixtape. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we turn our lens to Kneecap beating the system and what it means for the future. But first,
the last thing they need is to listen to a wee head case from West Belfast trying to lecture the Irish people on politics. We're always on the right side of history. We have been throughout history. Do you know what I mean? So, may it continue. You know what I mean? And anybody who hasn't felt the need or hasn't spoke up yet, it's not too late.
Any closing messages to the British government and the Prime Minister in particular, maybe?
Better luck next time.
not my words, but the words of Mo Chara. Why, dear listener, and indeed, dear viewer, were you just listening to Liam O'Hanna speak out in victory at Woolwich Court, London yesterday? Well, this week saw one of the most monumental moments in both Irish cultural and political life. The trial of Kneecap's Mo Chara. And while the trial may have ended before it ever really begun, it has opened a door that should concern us all. That of the criminalisation of art itself. But before we get to the verdict, let's dive in to how we got here. How did we get here? Mo Chara stood accused of terrorism charges, not for planting a bomb or conspiring violence, but for what happened on stage. At London's O2 Forum in Kentish Town, during a performance, he was alleged to have displayed a flag in support of Hezbollah, a prescribed organisation under UK law. This charge, coming soon after Kneecap's high-profile pro-Palestinian statements, notably at Coachella 2025, was seen widely as part of a pattern, an attempt to suppress a Belfast trio already known for speaking truth to power. What followed were protests, pre-trial hearings, Westminster speeches demanding the festivals remove Kneecap from lineups, cancellations of US tours, and a formal ban from entering Canada. Then, this week, inside Woolwich Crown Court, after months of delays, the charges collapsed. The Chief Magistrate ruled that they had been brought unlawfully. Prosecutors lacked the necessary consent from the Attorney General and Director of Public Prosecutions within the 6-month statutory window. The court held it had no jurisdiction to proceed, which means, in plain language, the trial should never have taken place. So the verdict is simple. No conviction. Mo Chara walks free, greeted by cameras and supporters who rallied behind him every step of the way. Upon the case being thrown out, Kneecap released the following statement. A message from Liam Og. A massive thank you to my legal team, Dara, Jude, Blinna, Brenda, Gareth, and all at Phoenix Law. A special thank you to my interpreter, Susan. The entire process was never about me, never about any threat to the public, and never about terrorism, a word used by your government to discredit people you oppress. It was always about Gaza, about what happens if you dare to speak up. As people from Ireland, we know oppression, colonialism, famine and genocide. We have suffered and still suffer under your empire. Your attempts to silence us have failed because we were right and you were wrong. We will not be silent. We said we would fight you in a court and we would win. We have. If anyone on this planet is guilty of terrorism, it is the British state. Free Palestine, Chuckagar Law. Make no mistake, the verdict is not a ringing endorsement of free expression. It is a dismissal on technicality, not a defence of the right to speak, to perform, to provoke. The government has, for now, stepped back. Not because its power has been rebuffed, but because the paperwork failed. Essentially, this was the UK government testing the fences. And that is more chilling, because this entire episode was a warning, a signpost on the road to authoritarianism. For young artists, the message is clear. If it could happen once, it can happen again. If it can happen to Kneecap, it can happen to anyone who stands on stage with an uncomfortable truth to tell. And next time, the technicalities may all be in place, and you may not have the support Kneecap had. This might happen to you, but it might happen in silence. The trial did not emerge out of nowhere. It wasn't accidental, it was part of a wider drift, a slow, steady narrowing of what we are allowed to say, sing, shout and perform. All you have to do is look at the people who were in support of bringing Kneecap to court, who were in support of cancelling them and who had asked for them to be cancelled. All along the way, we have lost something vital. We have lost the assumption that art is sacred ground, that when the lights go up, the space belongs to the artist, that the stage is a place apart, where even ugly, uncomfortable truth can exist without fear or handcuffs or headlines. Subtext, symbolism, metaphor, abstraction and commentary are tools of the artists. Said tools cannot be dismantled by the bland hands of politicians, yet they try. We have watched as artists were dragged into court for words spoken into microphones. We saw governments lean on festivals, nudging them to drop voices. We saw festivals themselves censor, slicing at the edges. We watched insiders whisper, conspire and campaign to have Kneecap struck from bills. We saw Bob Villan investigated for speaking out at Glastonbury, and we saw the Mary Wallopers set cut mid-performance. Each incident is siloed and small enough to dismiss if you so choose. One artist, one gig, one band, but the pattern is clear. A testing, as I say, of the fences. How much can they push it? How far can they go? How much can they do in silence? And what they can do in the dark? What is done here in art can be done and will be done in other spaces if it is proven to be effective by the people wanting to wield it. What they want is a world in which silence enforces itself, where artists will self-edit, pull punches and sand down their edges before anyone even needs to ask them to, before they're even brought to court. And this is why Kneecap standing up to the UK government is so important. It shows that artists will not be pushed around and will not be silenced. It shows that there are fences, that there are ways for free speech to still stand. There are certain things that governments cannot take over. It is the revolutionaries on the ramparts, but how long can those barricades last? Make no mistake, this is a cultural moment, not just for Ireland, not just for Kneecap, and not just for the UK. Over the time and over the span of this summer and the last year, we have seen things become the norm. At very least, the norm in news feeds. What happened with Bob Villan at Glastonbury, what has happened with Kneecap, and what has happened with bands like the Mary Wallopers has shown that art spaces are not safe at the moment from oversight of government or government interests. That moment where they spoke about removing Kneecap, or the possibility of removing Kneecap from the lineup at Glastonbury, and the lean from indeed agents who signed a letter in order to get them removed from the label, is now seen as a norm. It has broken something. As I say, it has opened a door through which anyone can enter. The attack on artistic expression has been a slow creep, but it has not in any means just been in this last year. We've always seen attacks on these spaces. Indeed, in last week's episode about fascism, we covered a lot of that. Why these spaces and why artistic expression is attacked. Because it is a form of rebellion. It is a form of the internal self. If you read 1984 by George Orwell, you can see that one of those attacks is in the person themselves, is self-regulation, is somebody no longer expressing themselves without the consent of the government. Now, we're not that far at all right now, but we are moving into it. If Kneecap and Bob Villan and acts like that are oversight by politicians, the worst people in the world are politicians, by the way. They do not understand subtext, symbolism, metaphor, or anything like that. All they want is the immediate, the thing that will get them over, or the thing that will push their views and their oversight into being. The fact of the matter is that Kneecap have always rebelled against the UK government and have been a thorn in their side, not just with Palestine, but also with issues to do with Northern Ireland. They are a band who have never backed down. In fact, of all the bands that the UK government could have chosen, they were indeed the wrong ones. They were the ones who had it about them to stand up. And as I say, there was a crowd, there was a following, there was a movement behind them that pushed them through. One of my biggest fears is maybe that's a lesson they've learned. Maybe next time they'll pick something smaller. They'll go after some of the smaller spaces. It'll be a more insidious creep. Maybe what is no longer law now may be law in the future. We've entered one of the most dangerous places when it comes to freedom of speech. And while the UK government has tried to backpedal on this, using the technicality to get themselves out of the web that they had weaved, shows a willingness on their part to do so if they thought they were allowed and if they thought they would get away with it. One of the things that really struck me throughout all of this is to do with the festivals and is to do with the art spaces. That video of the Mary Wallopers set being cut by the sound people, or, well, not the sound people, but the people organising the gig, is an incredibly striking one. It says something that has been taking place in artistic spaces for a long time now, and that is the thing of corporate creep. Corporations have been involved in music festivals for decades. A lot of the time, at the beginning, it was drinks companies and stuff like that, or food companies moving in to sell drinks and food to people going to your local festival. And it was kind of, well, there's people here, there's money to be made, let's marry those two things. People want alcohol, people want drinks, people want food. These are all things that people enjoy whilst watching a gig. That's perfectly fine. The problem is when those corporations begin to sponsor said festivals, when they become overseers of it, where they have a leverage, where they have money invested in said cultural space. Now, it may seem like, oh, well, they're just sponsoring it. They're just putting it out there. They're just, putting the money in so that culture may thrive. No corporate company like them does that for purely charitable means or cultural means. I really hate to be the one to break it to people, but that is not what they're doing. They are at best just advertising, and at worst they are overseeing what is happening. Those corporations comes a lean. They can lean on festivals, they can lean on art spaces, they can lean on artists and go, well, you know what you're doing actually, I know we're just the advertisers or we're the sponsors, but maybe we'll pull our sponsorship if you do such and such a thing. Maybe we'll take all of that away. Maybe we won't get involved. Maybe we won't give you the money for next year. And yeah, it would be terrible if we pulled our money out and you had no money for your festival next year, wouldn't it? It is leverage. And they have insidiously moved themselves into this space in order to give them a position where they can do this, where they can lean and stuff like this. Festivals and these things have become corporate spaces, and you can see that by the way they acted and the way they moved. These weren't the acts of people interested in art and in culture and freedom of expression. These were the acts of people who were frightened of their bottom line and were frightened of repercussion. They were not willing to stand up, they were not willing to express. I obviously understand there are festivals that did put Kneecap and all of those artists on, including Glastonbury, onto their lineups, but the lean and the creep is true. The fact that the government themselves felt emboldened enough to lean on acts or festivals like Glastonbury and have that actually work out for them in other festivals shows what we mean. The ban as well from Kneecap entering Canada because of terrorist connections or their idea of terrorism is also one to be worried about. It is the government itself using that power to say to the people of Canada, you can't have these people come in because you know what, we see them as dangerous. We don't think they're right for you. It is an act of intimidation. It is one to show younger bands and younger artists, younger festivals or anything like that, you mess with us, we can come down with you. We very nearly did it with Mo Chara and Kneecap, but we can try again. People like this learn lessons from stuff like this, and I'm sure they have learned lessons. Other ways of doing what they want, other ways of achieving what they want. I said in this, you only have to look at the people who agree with removing Kneecap from festivals, who agree with censoring them, who agree with silencing them and acts like them. Why is that? Why do they agree with it? As I say, this corporate creep into art spaces is something we should all be concerned about. It may seem like sponsorship, it may seem like a good idea, and the advantages are obvious. They are financial. The more money that a sponsor puts in, the more money that is available at the festival, the more bands you can have, and theoretically, the more money should be paid to the artist performing. That's not always the case though, is it? The ticket prices are soaring, all of these types of things. Art spaces have become corporatised to a degree in which they have corporate thinking. Basically, is this Kneecap in this instance, Bob Villain and others, and the Mary Wallopers good for the brand? How about we just silence them, lest we get in trouble? At moments where the Mary Wallopers are on stage and being silenced, literally their mics muted, is indicative of that. It shows that even on stage, even in front of thousands of people, there was a fear there and there was a feeling it could be gotten away with. The problem is, of course, is that art spaces, gigs and festivals are predominantly attended to by liberal-minded people, by expressionistic people, the people who believe and agree with acts like the Mary Wallopers and Kneecap. So they won't be able to get away with it, but it is a clash and it is something that we should all be worried about. It is one of the things that we have lost in the fire and one of the things that this whole situation with Kneecap has exposed. What corporations are sponsoring these events? Look at South by Southwest and the protests that happened there, again by Kneecap and other Irish artists and other acts refusing to go because it's connections to the US military, to an art space, to a festival, to a cultural event. Their money being used to sponsor this event. And obviously they were right. It could lead to oversight. It could lead to picking what acts can and cannot play, what can and cannot be said, who can wear what shirt where. Kneecap have stood up to one of the biggest governments in the world and won. Let's not lie to ourselves. This is continuing. Kneecap are still banned from coming into Canada. Their US tour was still cancelled. Bob Villan was investigated after Glastonbury. These things are now glass that have been shattered. And once glass is shattered, it's impossible to put it back together again. And while we talk about censorship here, we can't forget what it connects to, because silencing dissent at home is inseparable from silence around atrocities abroad. And right now, Gaza is the most urgent example of that truth. Entire families gone in a single night, hospitals reduced to rubble, schools turned into graveyards, homes erased from maps. And the little aid that does make it through is blocked, delayed and rationed into nothing. These aren't just numbers or statistics on a screen. They're people, they're children who should be playing football in the street, they're parents who should be cooking dinner for their families, they're artists, poets, teachers, entire communities wiped out. And as you're listening to this show, these numbers climb. And here's the hard part. When artists are silenced for speaking the truth about Gaza, that silence is not neutral. It isn't polite. It isn't some abstract middle ground. Silence protects power. Silence shields governments from accountability, and silence allows bombs to keep falling as we do nothing. So yes, if we celebrate the dismissal of the trial, let's remember Gaza. Let's remember those who don't have the privilege of a courtroom or a headline or the chance to walk away free. There will be no hearing for the people of Gaza tonight. Let's remember them, and if you can, act. Yesterday, Mo Chara walked free, and that matters so much right now. But it should also remind us our rights aren't fixed in stone. They're not permanent to people who do not see them as permanent or beneficial to them. They have to be fought for, defended, contested. Indeed, these are the barricades of 2025. What gives us more hope is what always has: resistance. Artists who refuse to stay silent, audiences who refuse to look away. Those people outside Woolwich Court this week supporting Mo Chara, who would not let him walk into that courtroom in silence alone. Communities who refuse to abandon each other in the face of power. Because freedom of expression isn't theirs to grant or theirs to take away. It's ours. And the only way to keep it is by continuing to use it. So it goes, and there it went. Kneecap fought the law and won. But what about you? What do you think about this situation? What do you think about Mo Chara's win against the UK government? What do you think this says about the future of music and artistic expression? What do you think about corporate oversight of festivals and art spaces? What are your thoughts on this entire issue? And do you think this is something that will get worse? Will it get better? Are you indifferent about it? Tell me in the comments and let me know. But for now, as always, thank you for watching The Last Mixtape, and thank you for your support.
Firstly, I'd like to thank my legal team, Dara, Jude, Blenna, Brenda, Gareth, Roz, and to all at Phoenix Law. I'd also like to say Gurram Wygott, I think she's gone, to Susan, my interpreter. This entire process was never about me. Never about any threat to the public. Never about terrorism. A word used by your government to discredit people you oppress. It was always about Gaza. About what happens if you dare to speak up. As people from Ireland, we know oppression, colonialism, famine and genocide. We have suffered and still suffer under your empire. Your attempts to silence us have failed because we're right and you're wrong. We will not be silent. We said we would fight you in your court and we would win. Today we have. If anyone on this planet is guilty of terrorism, it's the British state. Free Palestine.